So we're still waiting for the lacquer to cure. It's just about ready to buff out, but there's a couple of things we can do in the meantime. And the first one is installing the spring claw. Now we want to get this nice and centered on here, and we want to elevate it just a little bit off the bottom there. And the easiest way to do that is to work out the center point here. I mean, we could use the line from the center of the body, or we could use the template that we originally used to route the spring cavity to begin with. It has a center line that's already marked on there. So I've got the spring claw here, and I just want to get a measurement between the two holes. And it seems to be from centre to centre about 34 mil. Okay, so if we halve that to 17 and we lock the calipers off, I can transfer a couple of lines either side now. So I just marked down the depth that I want to drill the holes, and I put a couple of marks there, and I can use a punch now just to put an indent there so the drill can grab. So I'm just going to go in at a shallow angle. Slowly. So that lines up nicely. We've got an even space down each side of the springs, so we've got the claw is nice and centered in the middle of the cavity. So we can take that back out now. That's all done. Alright, well, we're at the stage where we can wet sand now. So the finish has gone on really smooth. It's laid down well, very minimal orange peel. And the reason for that is I wet sanded it before the last two coats that I put on. So I took it down nice and flat, and then I just sprayed a couple of coats over the top. And that was just because we still had a couple of low points that I couldn't sand out. There shouldn't be much effort involved in getting this flat, considering it's already pretty much flat the way it is. I'll start wet sanding this, and we'll get this buffed up, and we'll get this guitar together finally. Now I probably won't film a lot of this because it's no different to the procedure I did on the neck. But I'll show you the body at the various stages, the various grits, and then you can see it at the end when I'm polishing it out. So I've just finished wet sanding the body to 1500. And I've got 1800 here now, and what we want to do is we want to remove the scratches from the 1500. Now one way you can do that is reverse the direction that you sand. So if you sand that direction for 1500, when you do 1800 and you sand in this direction, once you wipe it off and dry it, you can see whether you've removed any of the vertical scratch marks, so you know when to stop. So the whole concept of wet sanding is sometimes difficult to explain to someone. I mean, it seems strange to be using sandpaper to make something shiny. It doesn't make sense. But when you think about it, what you're doing is you're levelling out the body first and getting rid of the orange pile with your 1500 grit, and then you're using successively finer grits to remove the scratches from the previous grit. So I'm using 2400 now, and that's removing the scratches that I got from using 1800. So gradually the scratches are getting finer and finer, and you get to a point where they're so fine that you can switch to a liquid compound, and after liquid compound you can use a glaze, which just gives it that final finish. So it actually works. It all makes sense. This has just been buffed out with coarse compound, and I'm looking for any areas that I need to, if I can see any light scratches, I need to take it back over while I've got the coarse compound on there and just fix those areas up. So the back's not looking too bad either. Again, I'm just checking for any areas that I may have missed on the buffing wheel or not buffed long enough, and I just want to fix those up now before we go on to the medium compound. And this is after we've just buffed it with the medium compound. So you can see it's just getting shinier and shinier. And again, all I'm doing is just wiping off the fingerprints and the excess compound, just so I can get a good look at the finish to make sure there's no flaws. So we can go on to the fine compound now. So when you're using the buffer, it's always hard to get in and around the horns here. I mean, you can get in there, but you really have to be careful, and there's a lot of little points where if you're not careful you'll burn straight through. So what I would normally do is buff all of the easily accessible parts on the buffer, and then I would do all of these hard to get to parts by hand. So what I did is I used the coarse compound, and I buffed the guitar out, and then I got my equivalent coarse compound, the rubbing compound that you saw me use on the neck, and then I did this area. And then I went to the fine, the medium compound on the buffing wheel, and then I went to the this stuff that I used on the neck as well. So I'm just finishing that off. They're almost equivalent to each other in terms of grit, And then I'll just go over to the fine oil on the buffing machine and buff the guitar out, and then I'll just go over everything with a hand glaze. So the reason I do that is it's just too risky to get a burn through at this stage when you're nearly ready to assemble the guitar. That'd just be the worst thing in the world, to have to do a touch up and mess around another week before you could buff it out. So that's the way I do it anyway, and it works for me. Alright, well that's the body buffed out. Let's just finish with the fine compound on the buffing oil, and really the only thing I need to do now is to just put the hand glaze on. Just finish it up with that and we'll be done. So it took all morning to do. It's not a quick process, but you know, you need to take your time and make sure you do it properly. So the only real worry now is that I don't scratch it or drop it while I'm working on it. So I just have to be very careful.